If you search the Conjuring house on YouTube, you'll find dozens of videos with millions of views featuring popular YouTubers and celebrities who've dared to spend a night in the house, or in the case of YouTubers Sam and Colby, a whole week at the alleged haunted home. Others who've spent the night in the Rhode Island home include Brent Rivera, his sister Lexi, comedian Matt Rife, and a slew of paranormal YouTubers. TV shows like Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters and the Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures have also visited the home. And as you can see from these YouTube thumbnails, they all try to do their best to convince you that the supposedly haunted home filled them with terror. However, in this video, I'm going to introduce you to a little-known story about the only two people who were undeniably terrorized in the home. To set up their story, I should first point out that the movie was not filmed at the real Conjuring house. The exterior scenes were shot at the Keith House in Curry, North Carolina. The interior scenes were filmed at Screen Gem Studios in Wilmington, North Carolina. My research into the real farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island began years before it was turned into a commercial business where fans can now spend the night and try their best to freak each other out. Or, if you believe the stories, confront the home's paranormal activity. I first began researching the true story behind The Conjuring back in 2013, in the months prior to the movie's release. This was when owners Norma Sutcliffe and her husband Gerry Helfrich were living there. They had purchased the 8.5-acre property back in 1987 for $169,500, which seems like a bargain in terms of today's prices, though Norma says that the price was high at the time and was made worse by a 10.5% interest rate. The realtor did disclose to Norma and Gerry that the house was rumored to be haunted, but they found the detail more interesting than anything else. After all, they could have never foreseen the fate that awaited them some 26 years later. At the time of the movie's release in 2013, Norma was in her mid-60s and enjoying a quiet life on the property that she and her husband Gerry had spent 25 years restoring. Then, almost overnight, after more than 2.5 decades of solitude in their home, things would forever change for them. And I'll admit, I share a small amount of guilt in that. You see, I published my research on The Conjuring's true story 2 weeks prior to the movie's release on July 19, 2013. My article began to gain a lot of traction online, and just 11 days after the movie's release, I received a not-so-pleasant email from the owner of the real Conjuring house, Norma Sutcliffe. Okay, to be more accurate, Norma was somewhat livid. While conducting research for my article, I'd come across several other articles and websites that had listed the address of her home. I figured it was public knowledge, and including it in my article wouldn't be a big deal. What I didn't realize at the time was that The Conjuring was about to become a massive horror movie that would ignite a franchise of films. I would soon learn that a stream of fans had already begun to flock to the home like an endless horde of zombies closing in on the living. I know, that might sound like an exaggeration, but from Norma and her husband Gerry's perspective, it's pretty spot on. Norma told me that she and her husband already had plenty of people driving by, with some getting out of their cars and sneaking onto her property for a closer look. This was happening at all hours of the day and night. Understanding her concerns, I quickly removed her address from my article, which had by then been live for over 3 weeks. I apologized to Norma, telling her I was sorry for posting it. She received my apology well, and we corresponded over several more emails during the next several months. I'll admit, I was a little confused at first because I had remembered seeing a somewhat recent interview that Andrea Perron had done when she visited the farmhouse and spoke to Norma, whose full name was used in the video. The video also mentions the farmhouse is located in Harrisville, Rhode Island, and Andrea even shows images of the home. Anyone even mildly curious could have found the address with little effort from the video. If you don't remember, Andrea Perron is one of the daughters represented in the movie who had lived in the home back in the 1970s during the alleged haunting. She's been the most outspoken member of the Perron family with regard to their experiences in the home, even writing a trilogy of self-published books on the matter, which are titled House of Darkness, House of Light. Andrea had been in Rhode Island for book signings, and she stopped by to interview Norma about her experiences in the home. Andrea says that the two had gotten to know each other years earlier and had become friends. In the video, which Andrea Perron uploaded to YouTube on March 5, 2013, roughly 4 months before the movie's release, Norma told Andrea that she and her husband Gerry had far less intense experiences in the home, including, but not limited to, the door banging in the front hall, sounds of people talking in another room, and the sound of footsteps accompanied by the sound of a door opening in another room. She also said that her husband's chair vibrated in his study. The only things ever visible to them were a blue light that Norma saw shoot across the bedroom, and her husband Gerry thought he saw fog in the home. However, Norma stressed that she always looked at things from a scientific standpoint and has never jumped to conclusions over these minor experiences. My own impression after rewatching their conversation more than a decade after I first viewed it is that clearly Andrea Perron was much more invested in the belief that the house was haunted. Norma was entertaining her, but was far more skeptical. At one point in their conversation, when Norma tries to rationalize the blue light she saw go across the bedroom as possibly the reflection of a car's headlight, Andrea puts her hand on Norma's shoulder and tells her in a friendly manner, "You keep deluding yourself, honey." During another moment, Andrea says that she remembers Norma's husband Gerry telling her that he was afraid to go in his study anymore because of paranormal experiences he had in the room. Andrea claims that Gerry told her years ago that the room he had wanted to be his place in the house virtually threw him out and that he spends very little time in there. Confused by Andrea's statement, Norma quickly corrects her, telling her that Gerry is not afraid of the room at all and never has been. In fact, it's his favorite room in the house, where he has always spent the majority of his time. Norma tells her that the chair vibrating was the only odd thing that happened in there, but Gerry was never frightened by it. Andrea was clearly fishing for something juicy, but Norma wasn't biting. Norma told me later that she was feeling anger when Andrea made the insinuation about Gerry's study, for the simple fact that it wasn't true. Norma also thought Andrea was recording their conversation for personal use. Andrea didn't tell her that she was going to upload it to YouTube for the world to see. This explains why Norma didn't mind her full name being used or it being mentioned that the home was located in Harrisville. Knowing what would happen to Norma and her husband after The Conjuring's release, it was a little strange to rewatch the conversation years later. I'll provide a link to it in the description below. It's somewhat haunting to see Norma in the video, knowing that she had no idea how the movie would soon devastate her life and the tranquility of her property. It's also worth pointing out that according to Norma, Andrea had told her that she was not involved with the movie. Therefore, Norma assumed that the Perron family name would not be connected to the film, and in turn the farm. But according to Norma, Andrea didn't tell her the truth. As the harassment on the property got worse for Norma and Gerry after The Conjuring hit theaters a few months later, Norma stopped playing along with Andrea's claims that the house might be cursed. By then, the living had become a far greater threat than the dead ever had been, and Norma had never entirely believed that the house was haunted. Norma made this very clear in our emails to one another when I brought up her conversation with Andrea. I have never said this house is haunted or we have ghosts. If you listen, I have always said when people thought they hear sounds, my reaction has always been, "Isn't it interesting?" I never acknowledge ghosts. My background is in the fields of psychology and science. I always said, never assume anything. I turn only to science. I have never believed in demons or devils. She continued, "We have loved this property and never had a fear until now that we are tormented by this film's release." During a 2-hour episode about the real Conjuring house on the Travel Channel show Ghost Adventures, Burrillville Police Lieutenant Albert Carlo stated, after the movie came out, it became non-stop traffic up and down the road. Onlookers were constantly snapping photos, shooting videos, and trespassing onto the property. Norma said that as the film became a blockbuster hit in the summer of 2013, intrusive fans started making life hell. She told Inside Edition, "They think they have a right, and that's what makes me so angry. If you could understand how devastated we are, we no longer have any sense of peace, no privacy, totally gone, or any type of security is gone." Just how bad did things get for Norma and her husband Gerry? In a lawsuit they filed against Warner Brothers in 2015, seeking damages and the cost for an extensive security system, They claimed that their rural farmhouse was indeed haunted, not by ghosts, but by horror fans and curiosity seekers who had watched the film. They described their property as being under a Conjuring instigated siege. The suit stated that internet users were posting videos of themselves trespassing on the property, blatantly ignoring the no trespassing signs that were posted everywhere. They knocked down fences. Other trespassers posted photographs and videos of themselves trying to get into the home. Even more extreme, some suggested that the house ought to be destroyed. Norma said that cars would park behind the barn and wait for her and Gerry to turn off the lights and go to bed. Instead, Norma and Gerry would sit by the window with the lights off, watching for the flashlights of the trespassers as they snuck onto the property. She said it felt like they were being stalked. They received harassing phone calls. People would open their mailbox and go through their mail. Their metal fencing was torn down several times. Some of the trespassers would refuse to leave and would yell at Norma and Gerry, who were far too old to physically remove them from the property. Once, Norma did have a physical confrontation with a man who confronted her in the presence of his 7-year-old son. Another person knocked down the fence rail next to the house, as if they had been trying to look in the window. Dirt bikes would arrive from behind their property from the back trails. Neighbors who helped patrol the home turned away a group of teens who arrived with crowbars in hand. The police were called numerous times by Norma and Gerry, as well as by the neighbors. Police officers chased after people. At first, Norma and Gerry thought their tormentors were mainly local thrill seekers, but then they started seeing license plates from all over the country. Norma and Gerry's lawsuit is not without precedent. The family that moved into the Amityville horror house after the Lutz family left sued both George Lutz and the author of the Amityville horror book, Jay Anson, who admitted that he made most of the story up. Coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren were also involved in that case. Like Norma and Gerry, the family sought damages due to the constant barrage of thrill seekers invading their privacy, and they won the case. In October of 2015, Norma Sutcliffe told Inside Edition that her goal with the lawsuit was to take the stigma off her home. In other words, she wanted people to understand that the movie is total fiction and that the home is not actually haunted. If it needs this publicity, if it needs a lawsuit to get this out, that is really my main goal, she said, is to get it out that this stuff is made up and take the stigma all off this house. Norma and Gerry's 2015 lawsuit wasn't the first time that she tried to expose the movie's many falsehoods. Prior to the lawsuit, Norma had already started fighting back in an effort to prove once and for all that the home wasn't haunted. With the help of a retired local journalist named Kent Spotswood, she uploaded an hour-long video to YouTube in April of 2014 in which she presented evidence to disprove the claims made in the movie and other claims made by Andrea Perron. Norma's video was the culmination of months of research that included examining public records and documents. Currently, more than 210,000 people have viewed Norma's video on YouTube. Norma begins the video by saying, "Our lives have been devastated by the release of this movie. The movie industry and all involved never bothered to consider the consequences to us, never told us that the movie was going to be made and how that may affect our lives. Even when they were informed about the horrendous experience we were facing, no one bothered to contact us. I am the current owner of the farm where the Perrons lived during the alleged events of the 1970s, when the Warrens also became involved with the family. Only due to the presence of the Warrens was this movie created. When I discovered the Perrons' name and the name of the town was used, I was infuriated." Norma goes on, "We will never feel safe or secure again. We have forever lost our sense of peace and privacy. And as long as we live here, we will never feel that peace and for anyone else in the future. We were left on our own to cope with this assault. We are so angry and frustrated. We are experiencing anxiety and stress when we should be enjoying our home and our retirement. It is enough for us to have to deal with serious physical problems without having to face people stalking, harassing, and trespassing at all hours into the middle of the night, who believe that they have the right to maliciously and willfully invade and violate our home and our lives, and to threaten our well-being." Norma concluded her introduction by stating, "Those responsible who created this movie caused this to happen to us, and they do not care." Their ordeal would have been overwhelming for even a couple who was young and in good health, but Norma was in her mid-60s and Gerry was in his early 70s at the time, and they both had health issues. As their lives were being upended, Norma was trying to recover from spinal surgery, which required her to spend 8 days in the hospital, followed by 2 weeks in rehab, and several more weeks at home learning to walk again. Her husband Gerry lived with a heart condition. Even 3 years after the movie's release, Norma told an interviewer, "We haven't slept in days because we wake up at 2 in the morning and there are people with flashlights in our yard. People call on the phone and ask, 'Is this the Conjuring house?'" Norma and Gerry's level of anxiety and frustration was reaching its limit. In 2016, Norma's husband Gerry suffered a stroke. In October of that same year, he suffered a second stroke, which forced him into a nursing home. Sadly, on February 23, 2017, Gerry passed away at age 73. Norma held on to the property for 2 more years, but by 2019, she had enough. In June of that year, she sold her beloved 280-year-old property for $439,000 to Corey and Jennifer Heinzen, a husband and wife team of paranormal investigators who wanted to turn the home into a business. The Heinzens offered daytime tours of the home and overnight stays. In their defense, they seemed to be genuinely passionate about the home and wanting to care for it. In 2022, the couple sold the home to its current owner, real estate developer Jacqueline Nunez, for $1.525 million. Corey Heinzen cited the frequent trespassers as one of their reasons for selling. Much like Ed and Lorraine Warren, the new owner, Nunez, has attempted to cash in on the Perron story, which was made far more famous by the movie. Nunez raised prices for overnight stays to around $960 for a weeknight and around $1,200 for a weekend night. Keep in mind that inside this home that is supposedly ripe with paranormal activity and haunted by various spirits, Norma Sutcliffe operated a successful daycare for 20 years. Yes, you heard that right. Norma operated a daycare in the farmhouse where these YouTubers can barely make it through the night. Perhaps that's all the proof you need to know the story never happened. The movie The Conjuring is complete fiction, Norma said in her video rebutting the film's events. "I find it amazing how the movie industry can create a movie, claim it was based on a true story, when not a moment had been based on any factual reality. It was left to writers to create their own, through their own imagination, never bothering to do any research, and it was their version from beginning to end." In reality, as far back as 1997, Norma was quoted in an article by a local historian as having told him, "There is nothing that ever happened here that couldn't have been explained by other means." Norma says that's how she's always felt. Furthermore, prior to the Perrons living there, the Kenyon family had owned the property for 200 years. They left letters with Norma and the Historical Society, stating that their home had never been haunted. The entire story seems to have begun and ended with the Perron family. In addition to Norma Sutcliffe's video, there are numerous other videos and articles that thoroughly disprove the Conjuring story. Yes, there was a real person named Bathsheba Sherman who lived in Burrillville, Rhode Island, but she never lived or worked on the property that the Perron family purchased in 1971. She lived in another part of Burrillville. It wasn't until the 1970s that the stories involving Bathsheba began to emerge. Andrea Perron's mother, Carolyn, was the first person to tell the story of Bathsheba Sherman. Then when Lorraine Warren became involved, she announced that she confirmed psychically that Bathsheba had made a pact with the devil. With the Warrens involved, Bathsheba Sherman was a witch who sacrificed her baby to the devil using a knitting needle. The only problem is that the real Bathsheba Sherman was never accused of being a witch. She never worked on the property, nor did she care for a child who died there. Bathsheba Sherman's actual cause of death on May 25, 1885, was recorded as sudden paralysis, which was most likely a stroke. She did not die in the manner seen on the film's poster, and Bathsheba's spirit did not subsequently terrorize all who lived in the farmhouse, nor did it prompt them to murder their own children. Many of the other deaths assigned to the farmhouse did not happen there or in the manner described, and some have no known basis in fact. Norma says that the town records prove that there has never been a murder or drowning on their property, even beyond the Perrons' claims. In the end, the only undeniable haunting involving the Conjuring house did not involve the paranormal. It was the tangible, real-world story of two people possessed by terror, not out of a fear of the dead, but rather a fear of the living. It is about a couple who are the unintentional casualties of a story that likely never even happened. Aside from Norma and Gerry, almost everyone else connected to The Conjuring has profited from the tale in one way or another. Ed and Lorraine Warren sought book and movie deals. Andrea Perron wrote 3 books and seems to be almost making a living out of talking about the story. Hollywood has certainly cashed in. The success of The Conjuring has so far spawned 3 sequels and a number of spin-offs, including the Annabelle and the Nun series. And we can't forget the YouTubers. They continue to flock to the house, hoping for their next viral video. As for Norma, after 6 years of torment and sleepless nights, she got nothing and lost almost everything. There is no trace of the lawsuit going anywhere. It would have likely been an uphill battle, one made much more difficult for Norma after she lost Gerry. Ultimately, Norma let go of the farmhouse she called home for 32 years and the property she loved. Decades from now, when someone brings up the classic horror movie The Conjuring, tell them about Norma and Gerry, the only real victims of the story. They deserve at least that much. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos about the Conjuring series and other horror movies based on true stories, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Anchors away, my friends.